Good morning. Today is September the 19th. This is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. This is our second meeting of the year. And I would like to stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. The meeting has been called to order at 9 a.m. We do have a quorum. We have one member, Mr. Bosak, that is not in the room, but he is online. Gary, would you give us a good morning or something?
Morning, everybody. Good to see you again.
Thank you. The first order of business is going to be the approval of the minutes of Tuesday, September the 5th. I do know that there is a question of an amendment, so Mr. Bosak, would you care to elaborate?
A couple misspells of my name, not a big deal, but we all know names are important to people. And then on, I think it was 5.0, regarding the family pass, I just thought that the minutes ought to reflect that I offered a thought that it was an operational issue and not something that this committee should generate an opinion about or initiate action forward. That should reside on the operations side. And since I see that's on the menu, it looks like that's the way things have happened anyway. So those were the two suggestions I made.
Well, we've already corrected in the spelling, and I'm sorry about that. I should have picked up on that. How would you propose? Do you believe this rises to the occasion that we need to amend the minutes?
No, I mean, just it was just a thought. That's not going to lose any sleep over it.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. So hearing no objection, we're going to move the minutes. Pass them as approved. We have an extremely interesting agenda this morning. I had promised that we would continue our discussion with the credit cards, which we will. That's on the agenda. And we're also going to talk today about our index that we have, that's been discussed from from the homeowners meeting on forward. So we're going to start with our first item on our new business agenda. It will be with Cliff Swan, and he's going to present the July and August financial review. Cliff.
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Good morning, committee. Good morning, everyone. Just want to get the year-to-date financials for August. Quick update on the audit. The audit is complete for fiscal year 23. And that will be presented in October at our second meeting in October 24th. So just a little plug there for the community. Please show up. There's a lot of great information in there that you don't normally hear during regular financial presentations. So it's a great B&F meeting to attend. Okay, so August 23, let's get started. For the month of August, real quick, July is posted, so we're doing a year-to-date presentation here, which incorporates July and August year-to-date. The July financial and the August financial is attached on board docs if you want to go back and look at the specific to July results. So looking at the revenue, finished at basically $1,000 on budget. Got a little better, finished a little better in membership for the month, and golf and ancillary suffered a little bit just because of the closures and the heat and the bowling alley. There's some ancillary revenue from the bowling alley that goes in that line item as well. So those two were off a little bit, fortunately offset by the other areas. On the expense side, finished 19,000 unfavorable to budget. We got some timing items in landscape maintenance and repairs and maintenance. We anticipate those to kind of even out as we progress through the fall. Also, we did have incur some additional expenses with the heat and the effects on our saguaros and trees in the community. So we've spent some time extracting those and also bolstering those to try and get to save them. So those costs are going to be are presented here and will continue into September as we get the things cleaned up and things progress on the repairs and maintenance and landscape maintenance side. For the month of August, so 18,000 unfavorable total with the impacts of the revenue and expense items that we talked about. Looking at prior year, finished 116,000 favorable on revenue, 315,000 on operating expenses, for a total of 199 unfavorable year over year. Looking at August year to date, on the revenue side, again, the heat impacts in golf, as well as Grandview being closed. And then on the ancillary revenue side, we'll see those as we open up our course, as the bowling alley opens up this month, and as the course Grandview opens up, we'll see these even out. And the weather is beautiful. I don't know if anybody noticed, but it's just gorgeous out there today. So I hope everybody tries to get out and golf or do something outside when they leave here. Expense side, we're 31,000 favorable. Salaries and wages is, there's just so many different moving parts in there. But basically, Kirsten presented at our GM Ops meeting. Kirsten is our HR administrator, presented at the GM Ops meeting, and in her presentation, she stated that we were 13 positions were open. And that's being reflected in the wages and benefits. And then again, the things we talked about on the landscape maintenance and repair and maintenance side with timing and just heat-related items that were taken care of. So year-to-date to budget, we're 16,000 favorable for an operating cash outflow of roughly 1.2 million versus 1.215 million. Compared to prior year, we are 206,000 behind prior year. Budgeting the revenue as we continue to progress through the year, making up some of that variance over prior year. So when we look at the expense line items, the big hitters are wages and benefits, 162,000. These are budgeted items, but merit increases, health insurance cost increases, and so those are built into that. And then utilities, we've just really been, the heat has just been unbelievable. I personally received the highest electric bill I've ever received last month. I don't know about you guys, but so the cost of utilities has just gone up drastically, and the heat is just not helping. So 154,000 year over year change. And then on the landscape and repairs and maintenance side, again, those saguaros and tree trimmings and just the inflation impacts on chemicals and fertilizers kind of hitting that year over year change. On the summary of capital, we look at August compared to budget. First of all, I want to talk about the line item in there. It's the second one down, estimated reserve fund allocation. That's our entry that we're taking and allocating a percentage of our, it's roughly 7% of our member dues revenue. And we're moving that down in the capital section as an estimated reserve fund allocation, so we can call that out every month. So with that said, we had budgeted 82,000, and we've reserved 81,000. So for the month of August, we're 1,000 off of budget. APF fees, you can see, are we're about even with prior year, but we are a little ahead of budget, which is good. So 50,000 favorable there. Looking at the investments, so first of all, the investment income, 37,000 favorable for the month of August over last year. We'll continue to see that 30 to 35 to 45,000 increase month over month, year over year as we continue. And on the valuation, the unrealized gains and losses, we went back 236,000 in valuation for the month of August. Compare that to prior year, APF fees, 81,000. We didn't have the estimated reserve fund allocation line item in prior year. However, we created it for presentation purposes and budgeting purposes. So how we calculated that was last year our budgeted cash inflows was 1,167,000. So we took that 1,167,000 and allocated it based on what the percentage was at the end of the year, how we finished, and allocated that 1,167,000 over the year. And this was the allocation for the month of August when we did that. So that's how we created that line item. We wanted to have a comparable when we were looking at these financial statements and presenting, so we can compare how we're doing to prior year. So 81 versus 96. Keep in mind, last year we budgeted 1,167,000 in income from operations. This year we budgeted about $1 million, a little over $1 million. So we're automatically going to be behind just based on how we budgeted last year versus this year. So hopefully we'll see that increase as we go through the year, as those golf rounds start to churn and we start collecting more for bowling and things like that. So that being said, 15,000 behind prior year on estimated reserve fund allocation. Looking at the investment income, again, we're going to continue to see that 35 to 45,000 over prior year as we go through the months. And then on the realized, unrealized gains and losses, performing better by 586,000 than we did last year in the reserve fund investments. Year to date, to budget, APF's up 100,000. And then on the reserve fund allocation, running right about last year's rate year to date, which is good. Investment income, double than prior year, double than budget, twice budget, which is good. 80,000 favorable, and then unrealized gains and losses, 166,000 year to date, and then but offset by the 80,000, so 86,000 when you combine those two together. Compared to prior year, APFs, again, I think we collected 4 more APFs this year than we did last year, August year to date, plus the increase in the APF fee from 42 to 5,000. That's 191,000 over prior year, which is good. And then on the estimated reserve fund allocation year to date versus prior year, 30,000, running 30,000 behind through 2 months versus prior year. Investment income, 76,000 favorable, which combined with the realized or valuation change, running ahead of prior year by 19,000 in total. So capital related notables, talked about the APFs, 187 versus 183. So four more than prior year. And then reserve fund valuation change, year-to-date 57,000, offset by 76,000 increase in investment income. So total revenue over under expense, unfavorable 10,000 year versus this year versus budget, and 162,000 unfavorable this year versus prior year. Switching to the capital budget, so last year we approved a budget of roughly 5.5 million, and with the POs that have been issued, we're projecting 187,000 favorable to that number through August. This is we attach the list every month of the capital items. The highlighted items are the items that have been paid and completed. So this will turn yellow as the year goes on, and you'll see in September there'll be a lot more yellow on here. But 4.134 million in POs issued on the 5.459 million in capital spend. So looking at the allowances bucket, 400,000 in budgeted allowances. We've issued 170,000 in POs on that allowance spend for an unspent allowance at the end of August of roughly 230,000. This is a list of those items. The biggest item on here you can see is the well pump replacement that is being completed right now at Pebblebrook at 122,000. We call out well pumps in the allowance specifically, and the specific allowance amount for that was 95,000. So you'll see in the capital presentation for next year, we're looking at increasing that 95,000 to 115,000 in allowance as we budget forward. You'll see that in Carl's presentation a little later. But 122,000 of the 170 is associated with the Pebblebrook well pump replacement. So the reserve fund, where do we sit in terms of the reserve fund and the FFB percent through August? So the percentage, the FFB percent for June 30 was 50%, and we budgeted 49% for the budget. So we track this as the year moves on with all the impacts and the change of the operating cash flow, APFs, capital spend, reserve fund valuation change. We're tracking at 50% right now, so a little ahead of budget. That concludes my presentation. Mr. Rhodes?
I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
This is, I don't know if you can provide this or not, but do you have any idea how much it's really cost us because of the heat? How much it's cost because of the damage that's done to the plants from the heat, like the saguaros and the plants that are, yeah.
Todd is not here.
Okay.
But I looked at it. It's about 12,000 that we've spent on removals and extractions of certain things due to the heat at this point, so far for the last 2 months.
Thank you. I'm sure it's going to come out to be more than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question on slide 11.
Okay.
You've explained this to me before, but I'm going to ask you to do it again. Okay. The unrealized realized gain of 236. And I know what an unrealized gain is, but this doesn't mean that we've lost another 236,000.
No, it's losses. The key there is realized versus unrealized. We we recognize the valuation change every month in our financial statements. Okay, so we book that as the year goes along. So we present a true valuation of our portfolio. However, unless we sell those investments, they don't become realized. So generally speaking, the valuation change is not a realized loss. Now, there are times when we sell, so we've positioned ourselves, for example, to put money aside because we're going to have to pull from the reserve fund this year, roughly $4 million. And you'll see the calculation on that when we do the audit presentation October 24th. So last year, we positioned ourselves by selling some stuff. So when we realize that loss, we just take it out of the unrealized bucket and put it in realized. So, but to answer your question specifically, we have a realized loss because of the selling of those assets. Okay, the selling of those investments year to date of $257,000. Now, that was recognized as the year went on last year, or as those investments changed. We actually have an unrealized gain of $91,000.
So just to wrap this up, we are having Capital Trust, Cap Trust, will be here on November the 7th, and they will provide a very comprehensive review of the performance of our investments. So that's all the questions I have. Do any of the other committee members have anything? Christine?
Thanks, Dick. Cliff, this is really small, but we're on the same page, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
You recognize, you're using this in a couple of these capital-related, very small amounts for the sale of assets or other gain and loss.
Yeah.
What are those assets? Are we disposing of them, or I'm just curious?
Yeah, so you'll see in the let me get there. In the allowance spend, we did a flooring project at Kuntz,
Right.
and there was $5,000 left on the life on that flooring that currently existed that we replaced, and we just didn't get the life out of it that
We had to write
we
that off.
thought we would. So we had to write that off. Yes,
Gotcha.
and it's a non-cash item, but yes, it is reflected as a loss.
Thank you for that. I know some of my fellow residents have wondered in the past, are we selling things, or, what is there some kind of an off market? Thank you for answering that
yeah.
for me and for everybody else. So
Yeah,
appreciate it. and
generally
understand.
that runs at a gain because we get a lot more useful life out of the assets that we replace.
Gotcha. I understand.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Frank, do you have a question?
I do, thank you, Dick. If we could go back to slide 11.
Oops. Sorry, Terry. Can you put that back in presentation?
Okay, going back to the number,
There we go.
236,000.
Yes.
Why do you not, I assume we had some realized gains during the year? Would that be correct?
During this year?
Yeah,
No.
well, this year, August.
No.
No realized gains. If
No.
you had realized gains, would you have put them on a different line?
No.
Or would you have just netted everything out?
Yeah, we net that out. We also net that out with the investment fees as well.
Okay. And so did we have any, I think I heard you correctly, we had some unrealized gains? Is that correct? In other
Yes,
words,
we had
might
a
have
positive valuation change.
Okay, so we might have had some account increase in value and some account, okay.
Yeah.
I've got that. I think it's important to note that a lot of people who aren't well steeped in financial statements, this really has no effect on our operating revenues. It's a paper loss more than anything else, correct?
Yes. On the unrealized side, yes. And then if there's a realized gain or loss, it's handled in the investment account.
Correct.
Yes.
Gotcha, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to entertain questions from the floor. Okay.
Nothing online, Dick.
Given that, thank you very much, Cliff. I
Okay.
appreciate that. Very nice job.
Chairman Rhodes,
Yes, sir. Gary?
do we not need to take a consensus vote to pass this forward to the governing board for approval?
Thank you. We will. Do we have a consensus to forward this to the governing board? Thank you very much, Soda. The next item on our agenda is capital, initial capital discussion with Carl Wilhelm.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Carl Wilhelm here, going over the 24-25 proposed capital improvement projects. This document has been shared with all committees up to date, so sports pavilion, properties, chartered clubs, golf, and you are our final presentation for the month of September. Just a few things about this document. It is a fluid document, so every month you'll have a revised version of this showing any capital changes, positive or negative, in costing. Any items deleted due to discussions that I might have with vendors, continuing on doing the homework that we do each and every day on reviewing our capital R&R. This list is a compilation of a lot of work that began basically July 1st. We open up our reserve study tool, take the reserve study items that we know have met their useful life, and create the initial list. We also collect any information of new items that are considered brought to the table by either our members, the governing board, staff, other areas. And we compile this list to show the new separated from in the tan areas. You will see this list reflects the reserve study R&R items in blue and green. Blue is generally the areas that myself or other department managers manage, and the green is what golf ops or golf maintenance manages. And then finally, there's a section towards the end that are our allowance that we put in each and every year. I'll discuss those in a little more detail. And then finally, I have a box at the end in gray that this will be the last time you see this. It was just brought so that everybody understands the work that is put into our capital budget. So in the initial list that was created, we sat at approximately $15 million in capital items. The majority came from the reserve study tool. After reviewing each and every one of these items for legitimacy, have they met their useful life? Do they really deserve to be replaced? You can see that we have moved to future years approximately $5 million worth of those items to place them in the right year and get extended life out of most things. An example would be this lecture hall. One of those items on that gray area would be the replacement of the carpeting in this room. And as you can see, it's in really good shape. Those are the decisions we make at the time of review. So I'll get started. Spend a little time in detail on the larger items and kind of allow you to breeze through the smaller R&R items that are typical, such as HVAC and roofs, things like that. Again, I mentioned that this list is fluid, and what I mean by that is I am continually working on it over this next few months, meeting with either architects or vendors to get the best assumption for next year's costs. So you might see some cost changes come. In fact, you'll see a significant change in October's list, and I might mention a few of those things as I go down. So starting in the new area, we are proposing the Sports Pavilion Lizard Acres barroom renovation and equipment. This is a project that was proposed by the Sports Pavilion Committee, had positive review as they made their recommendation through the governing board. Last year, I proposed that cost to be approximately $225,000. Where we stand today is I am at the beginning stages of putting together the committee to help with compile all the information that I've gathered to date and really dive into the design, the equipment, and making the best choices, working with our architect and making sure that everything is possible. So you will probably see some positive cost adjustments in this as we move along. Facilities maintenance requires a tractor with a backhoe for $75,000. R.H. Johnson Library expansion renovation. This is a request from, again, a positive presentation that was given by the library staff and Katie O'Grady, and had positive recommendation to move forward with some form of planning by the governing board. Currently, we have an architect out providing us the correct information on whether this $70,000 and the future designs that we're discussing during our operational staff meetings are moving in the direction that we're hoping for towards that expansion and renovation of the library. So more to come on that over the next couple of months. We're proposing that the Kuntz tennis facility, as it exists today, be renovated to be made useful back to the community. The initial conversations on this request for $50,000 worth of architectural and design documents next year would be to discuss getting rid of the existing infrastructure, putting post-tension slabs in place, and converting the 6 current tennis courts to a shared amount of space, possibly 2 tennis courts, and a social area on a third, such as we have at other tennis and pickleball facilities, and then take 3 courts and convert to the most efficient amount of pickleball, 9 or 12 pickleball courts. And again, this would be the funds to get that information to be able to put a true cost in possibly fiscal year 25-26. Moving on, it has been asked by the Properties Committee to fully enclose the Beardsley Park with a nice decorative iron fence, 4 foot tall, with the appropriate gates for all the access points, both for maintenance, event check-in, public walking, and that fence would be a 4 foot tall fence that matches what we have virtually at Horseshoe facility, and it goes from the booth westerly all the way to the Memorial Garden, and then behind the sound pavilion, and then all the way to the eastern wall, and it's approximately 800 feet long of fencing. The metal shop does not currently have any infrastructure for HVAC control systems. Now that we've completed the expansion, we feel that it's important that facilities maintenance has that capability like they do in all of our other buildings to monitor and control HVAC. This will help to ensure that we're getting the most efficient use and utility billing out of that space. Facilities maintenance also needs a flatbed trailer for a forklift. Last meeting, I mentioned that the current trailer has been used up. That is not exactly accurate. So Russ made it clear to me that the old trailer is not the right size for the forklift. It is being used, and it will not meet its useful life if we continue to use it for loading the forklift on. So that forklift needs its own flatbed trailer. The only CR13 request we have for this season is the leather rooms at Kuntz. Due to their processes of leather tooling and craftsmanship, their exhaust system is not large enough to meet their growth, so they've asked for an expansion of their exhaust system for $7,500. And that concludes the new section. Does anybody have any questions?
Actually, what I'd like to do is to hold the questions. we are planning, we have time on our agenda for future meetings. All I really would like to have this be is an introduction for the committee, so they can see what is on the schedule. For the new members of the committee, I know they're old ones, no, this is not carved in stone. This is the proposal, and we have an opportunity to review these and an obligation to review these items or these projects. We'll be looking very critically at all of the projects over 100 or 50,000 and all of them under $50,000. Now, so we'll take another look. So in the interest of time, I really don't want to engage in a lot of discussion on this right now.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Moving on to the repair and replacement side of the proposed list. Last year's discussion tabled softball field outfield fence replacement and said park it back in fiscal year 24-25 conversations. I am currently working with vendors to find the best cost opportunities to renovate that currently 24-foot tall fence around the outfield and replace it with approximately a 30-foot tall new fence. Discussions are ongoing there. The R.H. Johnson Social Hall ceiling renovation began with conversations from Properties Committee due to our upgraded lighting infrastructure, moving to LED fixtures. They had asked for repairs to the Social Hall ceiling and also a dimmable lighting functionality, and that was not possible with our old infrastructure. They don't make lights with LED and dimmability functions to replace the way that V-shaped acoustical sound ceiling is. I can honestly say that on this particular line item, the negotiations with sound engineers and architects is not going well. Everybody is too busy is basically the words that I keep getting back. So there's a strong possibility that this might have to get tabled until I can get more information. The R.H. Johnson Silvercraft millwork and countertop project is a continuation of what we do in a lot of other of the craft rooms throughout our facilities. Last year it was rip and sews cabinetry. This project has expanded though, and the club has asked for a little bit more of a remodel environment. They were aware that the reserve study tool also included a flooring replacement. We as staff and facilities maintenance and myself recognize that the ceiling is in really poor condition, very discolored. Anytime that we've done this size of room change, generally we've addressed those areas, and that's reflected in the costs below in different line items. So this is being worked on right now between the club, myself, and an architect, and over the next couple months we will be able to give you a review of what the full plans there are. Palm Ridge, just like R.A. Johnson received, is planning for an indoor and outdoor pool deck renovation with the rubber decking. R.H. Johnson Lawn Bowling Facility, sewer line, electrical lighting, conduit, and concrete repairs. In your time, as you reflect through the gray box that I mentioned of things that we deferred, Lawn Bowling Club did come with a handful of CR13s. They're interested in requesting that their lawn be converted to artificial turf. Due to the age of our current grass situation, their understanding of the way the Arizona water restrictions are going. So it's a big ask. 4 courts in a project like this could be multi-millions of dollars. So this is going to deserve some time and consideration from all of our committees and the governing board. But regardless, I have to put it into this budget here that we have a sewer line that is in poor condition. We're doing investigating as we speak right now on what the exact condition is with cameras. And we also were affected with all the lighting from a storm last season where 2 of the lights were taken down from the winds and all the rest of the lights were removed due to the conditions of the rusty bases were the same. So for safety reasons, all lighting has been removed from lawn molding. And if I were going to make a sewer repair and tear out the concrete, I would try to get a lighting infrastructure electrical conduit performed for future considerations of any renovation to that area. So just trying to be efficient there. I mentioned the indoor pool deck at Palm Ridge, now the outdoor pool deck as well. R.H. Johnson Social Hall roofs. Roofs overall in this package are, I just had a meeting last week. You will see a lot of the roofs being deferred. So in the October presentation, you can expect that we are going to extend the lives of these roofs due to the engineering that we've done up there and the investigation that they're in great condition. So some of their lives are going to get extended 5, 6, 7 years from now. That'll be changes that you'll see next month. Every year, one rec center gets a cardio replacement of its fitness equipment, and Palm Ridge is due. Again, I mentioned R.H. Johnson Activity Center roofs. You'll see a change there. Palm Ridge Activities roof, that will be a move forward for restoration of that roof. R.H. Johnson Admin will have a change. The Kuntz softball field outfield electronic scoreboard replaced. The club did come to us explaining that they're having some deficiencies with their scoring system, that board is aged out. It's not in easily repairable condition. So approximately $50,000 of the $75,000 is a cost of a replacement board. The general manager, accounting, and myself made the determination that is an asset of the recreation centers. So we're proposing that scoreboard be replaced. The additional $25,000 is just for the unknown. I don't have the model of that scoreboard specifically that the club is working with us to provide. And just in case it needs any special hanging methods or upgrade in electrical. You'll see that the lawn bowling benches need replacement. That discussion can be for now or for future year, but approximately 50% of the benches that they had have been removed due to that they've aged out, they were unsafe, and we have safe conditions now, but those benches need replacement. That is a significant cost, $75,000, but it's based on the absolute best benches available. We are working on trying to see what the lower cost benches are, so the difference between $700 and $450 per bench, and we'll make our best determination before this recommendation for this list comes due. And I think everything else pretty much is in the blue section are pretty typical items like HVACs, more roofs, pickleball court resurfaces, fitness center flooring rubber at Beardsley, pickleball courts at R.H. Johnson resurface, and cubicles for the finance department in the admin building. And again, if you are taking the time to look over these items, then I'll have the time to answer any questions. I'll move on to the green section. This is also reserve study items maintained by golf maintenance or golf ops and their requests. You'll see the significant item here is the irrigation system replacement for Echo Mesa, $4 million. And then the pretty much typical amount of machinery and the other line items that are always a significant amount of dollars. But each item is allocated in the accounting department's maintenance lists of vehicles. So that information is available if needed. And I do have Desert Trails Pro Shop parking lot asphalt mill and replace due for one of the final parking lots to be done. I think after that, the only one left is Stardust, and that's a few years out yet. Again, some HVAC, golf ball pickers, furniture for patios, a pressure washer, and a Pro Shop beer cooler. And then finally, we have our allowances. As we all know, that allowances are basically a dollar amount that we've averaged about $400,000 a year set up in the budget for unknown items, well pump replacement, if it's needed, safety and structural integrity, unexpected facility improvements, ADA upgrades, things like that. We've added an inflationary factor of 20,000 to make that 420,000 for fiscal year 24-25. And that concludes my list.
Carl, thank you very much. We have a question from someone online. Christine?
Thank you, Dick. It's a comment because you asked us to defer questions, but the comment from Mystical Michelle online is that it would be helpful if this information was increased in size for those with poor sight. When printed, it's very difficult to read.
Thank you. I would say to that in response, if he has access to board docs, you can go in and open the agenda, click on the icon for the web or for the spreadsheet. I'm actually doing that right now, and I'm at 175%, and it's much clearer. So it's really more of a technical thing. So, and hopefully that will be helpful to him.
The comment from Mystical Michelle was that it's when printed, it's small. But thank you, Dick.
Thank you. Okay, Carl, thank you very much. And I would say, and we appreciate the hard work you've done on this. You always are very thorough. And I would like to make some comments back to the committee. And I do want to open this up to the floor if you have a comment, as Mr. Robichaud did. We will be reviewing these items several times. As a matter of fact, I was looking at the outline that I have for the October 10th meeting. We have time on the agenda then. We have time again in November. But I assure you that we will go through this as a committee, and we will discern each and every line item on this. Okay, so your charge will be to look at this, review it. If you have questions, make note of those questions, and we'll get Carl back up here, and we'll get clarity on them. So, Carl, thank you very much. We appreciate your help. One of the things that we promised from the beginning is that we would have a transparent discussion on the question of credit card and banking issues. So we're going to start off with Cliff Swan as a presentation for us this morning.
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Okay, so I wanted to continue the conversation on credit card processing fees, just credit cards in general, operationally, what they provide for us, and just look at some of the data behind credit cards and operations. So here we are. I've also got some of the team here that I'm going to talk about some of the operational challenges that happen, some of the IT impacts, things of that nature. And then we have some of our management team here to answer any specific questions about any of those areas that will be impacted from this committee or from the audience. So they are here to talk about that if needed. So roughly $620,000 in credit card processing fees last year is what the association expensed. And you can see in this pie chart the different areas that those fees are coming from. The two major areas of membership and golf are there. And then recreation is, that's mainly special events, the special events credit card processing fees that we have. That's where that 4% is coming from. Sports Pavilion really takes a lot of checks and cash currently because of how they do their leagues. Usually the leagues will pool their money in the form of a check or cash and pay for their bowling. So a lot of theirs, they have a very small percentage, comparatively speaking, of credit card fees in the Sports Pavilion. So when we talk about fees, who's involved with these fees? Well, you've got your credit card associations, which is your Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover. And then you've got your credit card issuing banks. So the banks on the name of that card, if it's a Chase, Visa, or a Bank of America, MasterCard, you'll see that the card, those are the two major players when it comes to processing fees. And then you've got your processors and merchant account providers and payment gateways. That's basically if you want to think of it as the credit card terminal itself, processing the transaction. So what fees are included from these areas? So I put a little drawing up here that I found online of the different areas where these fees are charged. So you've got, again, payment gateways, credit card processors, card associations, and card issuing banks. It's important to note that in the transaction fees, there's interchange fees and assessment fees. These are charged by the card associations and the card issuing banks. Those fees are non-negotiable, and those are passed on in the transaction. So we have no control over those, and those change. They didn't change in COVID year. The banks and associations held those flat, but every year for the most part, those fees increase, and they're part of the transaction fees. So those are non-negotiable. But the processing fees, flat fees, the other processing fees, flat fees, and incidental fees that come from the payment gateways and credit card processors, or the merchant accounts, those are negotiable. So when we take a look at our credit card fees, how do we know what our rates are and if we're competitive and where we sit? So I will say the flat fees, or the fees from the credit card processors, from the banks and the associations, again, those are non-negotiable, passed on. And those vary. So it could depend on what type of card is being used. If it's a certain points program card, there's just so many variables. So to look at our rates that we're paying and compare to see how we're doing, it's very difficult because you can't look at every transaction the same. In addition to the different cards, you've got the different types of transactions, and we have various types of transactions. We do food and beverage, we do merchandise, we do services, we do golf. So all those rates, they look at the type of transaction as well to determine what the processing fee is going to be. So when we take a look at our rates, the best way to do that is to do what's called an effective rate, to see what our effective rate is, which is basically taking all those fees, the processing fees, the flat fees, the incidental fees, the association and bank fees, and dividing them by the total amount of the transaction. And that gives us an effective rate. A good effective rate, per Northwest Registered Agent, which is an online resource that I found, a good effective rate is 2.5% to up to 4%, depending on the type of business. And like I said, we have various types of businesses. So our effective rate in 23 was 2.91. So we, in preparation and just in analyzing our fees, we've had two carriers for the past 3 years. And we used last year to run a side-by-side comparison of those carriers. The two merchant accounts we had one was with Shift4 and Elevon. Shift4 has been in, I'm not sure how long it's been here, but it's been quite a while. I think since day one, since we've been processing credit card transactions. And Elevon was referred to us by TEI. They're a preferred vendor of TEI. And so, but both work with our operating system, TEI. And there's some communication that goes back and forth when these transactions process. So they have to communicate with each other. So we are kind of a little bit limited on who we can use. But that being said, we ran a comparison side by side, and Elevon came in at 2.72% for the year of 23, and Shift4 came in at 3.29%. Those Shift 4 contracts were consolidated and entered and basically started ending in August, and effective September 1st, those have expired. We went through the process of changing out those credit card machines at all, or credit card processors at all the golf courses and the rec centers. So now we're on full board with Elevon, and that should save us roughly $48,000 year over year in terms of those merchant fees. So that, and we moved all those effective September 1st. So at 2.91%, in that effective rate range, we're doing pretty good for the types of businesses that we have and the fees that we pay. So there are benefits to credit card fees. I know when we look at it, we look at and we see this big $600,000 expense line item. Important to note, the $600,000 in expense has been there since we started collecting credit card fees. It hasn't been $600,000, but we're not looking at a $600,000 increase year over year. We're looking at, I believe, the increase in the budget is $630,000. We got a budgeted $10,000 to $20,000 increase in credit card fees for fiscal year 24. So they do increase because our transactions, our transactional amounts increase. So the fees that we charge, they're flat fees on top of the fees that we charge. So as we increase our fees, our credit card fees will increase. As the banks and the associations increase their fees, which are non-negotiable and passed on, our rates will increase. So, but there is a benefit to these fees. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the costs if we decided to switch to a different payment structure where we charge a processing fee and what some of the impacts of that could be. But the convenience to our members, so being able to pay for things on the spot with a credit card is very convenient for our members. It's convenient for the association as well. We collect our money sooner and more efficiently. It's safer. There's less threat of theft and loss with credit cards because we're not handling paper instruments that can walk away. Eliminates the risk of bad checks. It only eliminates it if that transaction's paid with a credit card. So it doesn't eliminate all risk of bad checks because we still collect checks, but it helps eliminate that risk when, there's nothing more inefficient than trying to chase down a bad check. There just isn't. And a lot of times it's unintentional. Most of the time it's unintentional, but it still takes a lot of time to track those down. So it helps eliminate that risk. Also, cash and checks are being phased out of the environment. I mean, they really are. Most, enhancements that happen to operating systems or to applications, phone applications, those are all tied to electronic funds. All right. So, it's really being phased out. You can go to some ball games where some venues, they don't even take cash anymore, much less checks. But so that it's being phased out. It's kind of the way of the world. And again, I touched on this, but being able to collect our payments electronically allow us to continue to advance some of the services that we have here through our operating system. So, being able to collect those purchases electronically helps us also advance in how we do what we do and makes us more efficient. And I will say, if you think about a credit card, I know there's people out there that don't pay with credit card and they say, well, how am I benefiting? I'm not benefiting because I'm not getting points and I'm paying for the fees for credit card. I would say that you are benefiting because the association's benefiting because we're not spending time and resources doing some of these things. And that ultimately keeps costs down. And that ultimately keeps rates down, and that ultimately benefits everyone. So credit cards have tremendous benefits. So back to, how we collect our payments. So that big pie chart, I want to kind of talk about the two major areas in that pie chart, but total of 36 million. So Mr. Bagnano asked a great question last meeting about, how do you get to 36 million? Well, we've got, roughly 28 million in revenue, but we also have APF fees, 5 million, and then when we look at our revenue, there's a couple areas that we report in net, which is merchandise, special events, and food and beverage. So when you package all that together, APF fees, all the gross revenues, roughly 36 million annually. 63% of that is paid via credit card. 32% via check, and 5% cash. So we looked at a presentation in 2011, and in 2011 there was an initiative to instate credit card fees in membership, because they were in golf but they weren't in membership. And there was a presentation to the board, and we have that presentation, so it was kind of interesting to go through that. But the presentation basically said that we would like to have credit cards be taken at membership, and the impact of that would be $184,000 just in membership. Now it's roughly $320,000, $350,000, somewhere around there. But back then it was $184,000, and they took a poll of the community, and overwhelmingly there was 500 people polled, and 490 said yes, and agreed that they would increase the dues by almost $4 to help cover the additional cost of credit card fees and membership. So, it was kind of interesting to go through that presentation and see, but they had estimated that 70% of the people would pay via credit card. It was just kind of their estimate that they came up with, and they were pretty close. You'll see when we get into these individual sections. But it was a very good analysis. It was a good presentation, and it was just kind of interesting to go through. But 2011, unfortunately, it's not on board docs because we don't go back that far on board docs, but it was pretty useful information historically. So of the 36 million, I showed the pie chart earlier. There's two kind of big sections of that. It's membership and golf. Okay, 23 million of the 36 million is collected in membership. 53% of that is paid via credit card, 46% with check, and a small amount of 1% cash. Now, if we look at APFs, because APFs are collected in membership, so how much of that 23 million is collected in APFs? Well, APFs is roughly 5 million. Some of this is estimated, but it's estimated pretty close. So we estimate 4 million of that APF is collected for APFs. So 4 million of the 26 million, 4 million of the 23 million is collected is APFs. So when we do the math on that, 90% of that 90% of that 4 million is collected via credit card, 10% via check. I'm sorry, back up. 4 million is collected in APFs via checks. So when we back that out of the 23 million, the base is 19 million. So we reset the base for 19 million, and we talk about those percentages in membership, okay? Because we want to take the APF out of that, because you don't really have an option for electronic or credit card for APFs. It's all done in the closing process via check or ACH. So looking at that, the percentage goes up for membership dues, and golf cards are also collected in there. that percentage goes up to 64% from 53% and down on the checks to 35%. So when we look at membership dues and golf cards that are collected in membership, 64% of those are paid by a credit card, 35% by a check. So when we look at golf, we collect 11 million in payments annually from golf. So all the food and beverage, golf rounds, all the tournaments, everything that's collected there is 11 million. 88% of that is collected by a credit card. I mean, generally speaking, all of golf is collected by a credit card. We do have some cash that we collect there, but the vast amount is collected by a credit card. So if we decided to charge a processing fee, that would have numerous impacts. Okay, so let's talk about those impacts. So when we're looking at changing the customer paying habits, what's the impact of that? And we know that more customers would pay with checks and cash if we started charging a processing fee. We know that. Mr. Bagnatos up here said he would change. You know, doesn't mean everybody would change, but we know that people would. And we know that we've had people come in after the discussion of credit card fees in the last budget cycle at the golf course and at membership came in and said, hey, are you charging that fee now? They're asking because they would change how they pay. So we know that that would happen. We don't know exactly what that means. We just don't know without taking a survey or going through it. So, but we have to build some assumptions into costs when we think about that. But let's talk about those impacts first. We know that we'd have to have armored car services because our cash would increase to the point that we would have to do that. Right now we do night deposits, okay, at banks from the golf courses. But we know that people in golf, that 11% would go up. Okay, so that would require armored car service. There's a cost to that, but that's a change in operating, how we operate. Also, we know that our bank fees would go up. It's more expensive to count and reconcile, vault fees, things like that, to count cash and checks. Okay, so we know that that cost would go up, and that would be an operation change for us as well, labor-wise. We'd have, again, increased labor associated with the end-of-day balancing and reconciling. We just flat out would. We would have more checks and more cash to reconcile back to the daily deposit. Increased labor associated with that. Increased exposure for the staff and the rec centers due to having more cash. The threat of theft, the threat of robbery, that exposure would increase. We know in certain areas we don't have cash drawers at the rec centers. So people pay via member credit or credit card. So we know that those areas would now, if we had to put a cash drawer in there, there's an operational impact to that and there's an exposure to that. And then the time to process customers. I mean, people get grumpy. They just do. They expect to come in, they expect to process and go about their business. And there's going to be an impact to that. There is. There really is. So these are some of the, impacts of changing our customers' paying habits operationally. And then there's also a big impact on the IT side. So our operating system challenges. So currently, we did have a debrief, let's call it, brainstorming session with TEI when it comes to processing fees. So currently, we have the ability to charge a processing fee or a transaction fee or a service fee on billed items, which the only billed item we have is our membership dues. Okay? So we do have the ability for that specific item in our current environment, IT environment, to charge a processing fee for that. Anything else we would charge a processing fee would take development time and resources to do that with our operating system. Probably looking at, depending on how detailed and what we want to do with it, and we still wouldn't know what our limitations were until we actually figured out how we wanted to do it and how we actually could do it. But looking at 6 months development time and expense with our current operating system. So again, one of the other limitations that we have is the programming associated with debit card transactions is still unknown. So it's illegal to charge a processing fee for a debit card transaction. Debit card transactions a lot of times are processed like credit card transactions. We just don't know at the time that it's a debit or a credit card. We just don't know. So we'd have to build that as well into the programming, into the development, and that would take some time to try and figure that out as well. Can be done, but there's a cost associated with that. And then when we talk about our system enhancements, and we recently went through an upgrade, and Katie O'Grady and her team worked I don't know how many hours on this. Took a couple times before we could complete it, and there's still a couple of wrinkles we're ironing out. The reason that happened is, A, we've got a lot of data and a lot of history. B, we are on a system. There's no system for associations. There just isn't. There's no all-in-one, beautiful, hey, this is a great system to implement when it comes to an operating system, an accounting system for associations and planned communities. So we have a pretty good system that has been customized over time. That system was originally started as a golf membership system. And we've taken that and over the years kind of customized that and grew with the company, but customized that into what we have now. So there's a lot of customization and there's a lot of data. But every time we do an upgrade, which isn't very often because we've got all this data and all this customized programming that we've built into it. And it's not easy to do an upgrade because what they've packaged up to sell to somebody else is completely different than what we have. So we have to incorporate all that. So this would just be another piece of customized programming that would hamper us when we talk about upgrading our system, and would be another challenge for us when that day came. So what are some of the costs associated with those operational challenges I talked about? Now, some of this is, we don't have exact numbers, so some of this these are rough estimates on the cost. Internally, I would say the bank charges and labor, we know that's a pretty good number, okay? IT, that should say IT, hardware and licensing, $8,000. Pretty good on that, but we may need to put some floor safes in some of the golf courses that don't have them, so there could be some additional costs there. IT programming, again, until we scope that out, we know exactly what we want to do, but you're talking about 6 months of development and programming, okay? So 50,000 is a number that, could be less, could be more, we're not sure on that. Armored car service, 60,000, we're still working with a couple different quotes, but you're talking about 7 to 8 locations, 7 days a week, pickup, armored car pickup. So that's going to be an expense as well. There's also threats out there to doing this. They're just kind of unknown to us, but we know when you change customers, when you change their paying habits, when you put barriers in between a customer and a sale, well, let's face it, a processing fee is a barrier. Anybody who's ever worked in sales knows that barriers aren't good. You're trying to get past those barriers when you're trying to sell something. We are initiating a barrier. What's that going to do? You know, is it going to cause someone? I think we heard someone last year, Mr. Schlemmel, talk about he was at a golf course and he went in the pro shop and bought a shirt, but he didn't have enough cash on him. And would he have bought that shirt if he didn't have enough cash on him? He probably wouldn't have. He would have walked out. But he had a credit card, and there was no processing fee. He would have bought the shirt. We had you know, other various people say, look, I would change how I pay, or would we encourage people to fill their carts with more beer because they don't want to buy a pitcher at the end of the day because of a processing fee? People are finicky. I mean, people change their buying habits based on certain things. And a lot of times they might not make a lot of difference in cost, but they will decide to do things differently, and that will have impacts, and that could have an impact on our actual sales. Okay, so not just how they pay, but are they going to buy it? They might not. You know, when the public comes here to golf, you know how many golf courses they pass to get to us? There's no golf courses in this area that are charging processing fees. They build them into their fees. It's a cost of doing business. So we know that that's going to change habits, and that's a $2 million impact to us when you talk about outside golf. So what's the impact on that $2 million? We don't know what that would be. You know, the customer service issues that would arise, you know, people just flat out being unhappy because we can't process their transaction as fast as we could in the past. And that is an operational thing, and that is something that some people would not be happy about. And then just the increased labor and fees associated with bounce checks. For the past 2 years, we've collected roughly $32 million in payments between golf and between, you know, the golf cards, the membership dues. Well, we've had $10,000 in bad debt for the past 2 years on $32 million. How much more bad debt would we incur by more people paying with checks and this than us having to chase that down? So that's a cost that we don't know what the impact of that would be, but it's a threat to us, and it's a threat to the association. So Mr. Bozak was talking last B&F committee, and he said, well, you know, what are the alternatives that we have? Can we see some alternatives? And, you know, some of these are programming related. Some of them with the upgraded system that we have will have the capability to do. So, you know, offering e-check on the portal, that's coming. We have the ability to do that. So for customers to be able to pay electronically without having to use a credit card, that potential exists for us. Also, you know, encouraging members to pay with member credit. I mean, yeah, they would have to pay. They'd have to purchase that member credit with a check or cash or an electronic check. But you know, if we get the programming in place for that, but that's an alternative. And then, you know, continuing to just build it into the cost of our pricing is also an alternative. So those are the things, you know, the alternatives that we have and which are good, but that should be considered as well. Mr. Rhodes, that concludes my presentation. And again, we have some of the, you know, experts in our management team here to answer any questions on the operations side that might need to be answered.
Thank you, Cliff. You have clarified absolutely nothing for us. So, it isn't true, but we realize that this is a very complex issue, and we realize that it's going to be a very controversial, that it is a very controversial issue. I think I'm going to go ahead and open this up to the committee, and I'd like to put a little structure into it. We're going to start off with Mr. Bosak, and then I'll make the way down the line for the committee and ask if they have questions, and then we'll open it up to those in the floor. So, Gary, do you have any comments or questions that you have regarding this issue?
Just a couple, Dick. Cliff, great job. Boy, you took a really, really tough topic and shed a lot of light on the variables for us to make it more complex than I think anybody imagined. But just a reminder of the context that this was brought up last year. Every month it seemed we were looking at flat sales, 10% increases in expenses. So we were looking at every possible door where we might have an opportunity to save some money. And going after the big dollars, this became one of those that we wanted to look at. So the conversation continued through the year. I don't even imagine that this would have come up as a point of contention had we had a normal year prior to last year, but we don't know that. So I think it's still something that we have to consider just because we owe the community that. And yet at the same time, my own personal opinion is Cliff has said, has indicated a lot more difficulty and a lot more, it's not an easy thing to get done, even if we wanted to do it. So there's a lot of work to do to even put it together if we decided we were going to do that. Thank you.
Lynn, do you have a question?
I do have a question, but possibly a comment, if I may include that. I do question how we really feel we're going to have that much more cash, that we would have to have armored cars and so on. I think there are other solutions. I agree that there is going to be some IT work necessary, some programming, and some work in there. And I think you're being modest at $50,000. Honestly, that's, if you can do it for $50,000, you better grab it quick. My thoughts that have, in kind of mulling this around a little bit, is that first off, we need to take care of our Sun City West members, all of our people in this community. That's our job. In my mind, I think there needs to be a choice, whether they want to use it, not that they have to. I would suggest maybe rather than possibly using our membership cards in lieu of using a Visa card for those people who are members, maybe they could go into the rec center and pay their fees in whatever way they wanted to. If they chose to pay, say, I want to put $100 on my card, they can use Visa, but they know that they would have to pay, I don't know specifically which charge, but we pay 2.9% and then 30 cents per usage. So they'd pay that one-time usage card charge rather than paying every time they would swipe their Visa. So they're going to save some money by just even using their Visa card, putting it on their membership card. Another option would be if they'd rather go into the rec center and say, I want to pay with a check. Then they're not paying any Visa card charges. They can put it on their membership card and flag their card when they have a guest. They can flag their card if they want to go golf. They can flag their card if they want to go bowl. And it doesn't cost them any more money. It will cost some money to program. That will be the biggest issue. We got to look at IT, make sure that we have enough resources there and the talent that is needed. It's out there. It's not that huge of a deal. You get some programmers, you get some people behind the scenes who know what they're doing, they can manipulate it. But anyway, I think it needs to be up to our community and how we want to spend our money. And with doing it that way, they have a choice of paying a cash price on the membership card or paying with Visa. Same thing when somebody comes in from another golf course or from outside in. We have very good prices at our golf course, well below the rest. Yeah, there would be a Visa fee, or they could pay cash. Most people carry credit cards. I go in somewhere, I know I'm going to pay a fee. I go to Betty's Roost for lunch, I pay a credit card fee. It's a given. Anyway, that's my point. My thought is if we could consider doing something like that, you have one point of payment through the rec center. You don't have to have cash drawers at all the rec centers and the golf courses and all of that. You can flag in with their membership card. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Can I respond to one thing that you said is our public rates compared to our surrounding golf courses, we're right on the market. We're not cheaper. So yes, we're cheaper than Scottsdale, right? We're cheaper than the Biltmore, okay, but we're cheaper than Portobello, which caters to their members. We're not cheaper than Sun City. We're not. So we're pretty competitive on our public rates for our surrounding golf courses, which is who we align ourselves with when we talk about rates. So it would be an increase. It is something to consider when you're talking about golf rates. That's all. But I understand all your points.
Thank you. David?
Cliff, I have a number of things. So, in regard to the armored car, now we do night deposits. Okay, so what's the dollar threshold when you feel you have to have armored cars?
I don't know I don't know what that dollar threshold is, but I guess what I would say is if that 11% turns into 20%, I would say armored car would be necessary.
Well, I bring that up because when we put things up that says, oh, we're going to have to incur a cost, the reality is we don't know whether we're going to have to do that yet or not. It goes back to your comment about people changing behavior. We really don't know what is going to change. So I'm trying to make sure the community understands when you put those kind of numbers up, those are not an absolute. Okay? The other thing I guess I come back to, and Lynn commented on this, and maybe I'm just a product of the environment where I spent most of my career. Who does our programming? Is it internal people or external people?
I'm going to let Katie answer that question.
All right, thanks for the question. First of all, just as a reminder, we have 4 different POS systems. So you have Brunswick for bowling. We have a different one for the scheduling system and for the ticketing system for events. So the one we're talking about that affects membership in golf is TEI. It's a Canadian-based company, and they're Microsoft certified. They do the programming. We do not do that internally. But it begs the question of how we would handle those other POS locations for consistency. So in Brunswick, for example, up front, you sell beer through the Brunswick system. Don't know whether this is even possible to surcharge food and beverage there. The same food and beverage sold in Lizard Acres is under TEI. So if we implement it in one place and not another, I was one of those people here in 2011 that pushed for this change to have credit cards in membership because of the inconsistency where it was accepted one place, not another. So if we go down this path and we have surcharges here but not here, on member credit here but not on member credit here, we'll probably be revisiting it in another year. But specifically to that question, it is external vendors that do the programming.
Okay. So it just seemed to me that, based on my experience, when you contract with an external vendor to do programming, it shouldn't take you 6 months to do that.
They've got a lot of different clients, and so, they have a quarterly schedule for programming. So it takes a while to get on the schedule for the next batch, and then it's actually programmed quarterly, testing and installation. So it's not just they're at our beck and call waiting for.
Right, so we're captive to a proprietary software program.
Absolutely.
Okay.
For proprietary software programs.
Yeah, so always the way it works. Okay. On slide 13, again, this is kind of in the vein of my comment about paying $60,000 for an armored car. We're really not sure we're going to have to do that. I look at your labor costs down at the bottom, and I'm having a hard time believing that it's going to take another effectively 3.5 FTEs to cover the cost at all the golf courses.
7 golf courses?
Yeah, it's 3.5 FTEs across
Yes.
7 golf courses.
Yes. Pat, do you want to speak to that?
Good morning, Pat O'Hara, Golf Operations Manager. If we do encourage more cash, a couple things come to mind from my operations side is, first of all, our average age of our starter is 74 years of age. In my opinion, we're putting them at a little bit more risk with more dollars than credit card charges. And as far as the employees, that would become a handling of cash on a more frequent basis throughout the day. These numbers here, I'd get with Cliff and reevaluate them, but from Cliff's perspective, yes, those are solid numbers.
Okay, so for each of your golf courses at the end of the day, I'm trying to understand how you would do the process. So let's say you have a bunch of golf course cash at
Correct.
each of the golf courses.
Right, so on weekends.
You make, well, let me finish. So you make them reconcile at that golf course before the cash is transported.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
So on weekends, when our accounting office is closed, that's when we use the night deposits. Paperwork is then handed off to the accounting staff. During the week, deposits are picked up by our courier, and they hit all 7 golf courses. So we've got one of our staff members, part-time staff members, we have 3 couriers. They are picking up deposits, which now are heavily weighed in credit card receipts. Here, I think it would be more skewed toward cash. So that would be the purpose of the armored trucks, because of who's picking up that cash Monday through Friday. So things would have to change internally from our operation. Not to say that it couldn't, but they would change.
Okay, thank you. Last one, Cliff. So you talked about on page 15, that you're going to offer e-check in member portals, and you made the comment that it was coming.
Yes.
So when?
Katie?
So like Cliff mentioned earlier, with the proprietary software, it's very complicated to do upgrades, so we've been waiting quite a while to get the one that was just completed last month. So we're up to speed and upgraded. I would say in the next month, we had discussions yesterday. We have discussions scheduled later this week to have that, what's the next step to get the e-checks going. The other big one is the putting member credit on the portal and the ability to purchase member credit on the portal. It's been a huge ask for our members, but that would have to come into consideration as well. If you're paying a fee, a surcharge for member credit, but not for golf, but yes, for membership, you know, people will start playing the game of buying member credit at Grandview, not paying a surcharge, going on the portal, paying their dues with this member credit that didn't have the surcharge, defeating the purpose. So every time you start something, there's a loophole, there's a way around it that, you know, folks will find out. So we'd have to have that discussion. Are we charging it just on member dues? Are we charging it on late fees, and is that legal? Are we charging it across the board, or are we charging it per POS? So at just this particular checkout station or online, there's a ton of questions that need to be answered, and it goes back to then we're inconsistent, which is the whole reason we adopted the credit card fees, let alone a surcharge, was for consistency. And one other thing I just wanted to point out, I know it's a question of fairness. If you want to do this, you pay for it. If you don't, you don't. Everything here is based on service and convenience, and everything is subsidized, right? So if you use the member portal to make golf tee times, everyone is paying that cost, and there is a monthly hosting cost for that. You don't pay a surcharge to get on the portal to make your tee times. There's several other examples of that where everybody pays for everything. That's the beauty of living in Sun City West. It's why we're the foremost retirement communities, and other communities call us for advice. And every single advancement in IT or convenience that we've made has come at the request of members. So even back in 2011, credit cards came at the request of members. The phone app to be able to use your phone, member credit, all of these things. And again, if we do this, I have a feeling we'll be back in a year revisiting it because we're going to get a lot of blowback from residents, my personal opinion.
Let me make one final comment or two. I'm a big fan of Apple Pay. I love being able to whip my phone out and stick it up there and not have to touch anything. Okay, so, I use a credit card all the time. But also, it's not hard to walk into member services or any of the golf courses with $300 or $400, however much you want to, buy member credit, and then you just swipe your card when you go to play a round of golf in the future, and you don't have to worry about paying a credit card fee. It's not hard to do, and it doesn't slow the transactions down. The last time I did it, I actually timed it. Took 67 seconds for me to process that transaction with the person behind the counter.
Did you
Not
pay
hard
with
to
a
do.
credit card?
I paid with $300 in cash. That's my point, is people said, oh, well, you pay with cash, it slows the process down. Depends on what kind of cash you have. So, okay, I've said enough.
If you have to make change, it slows it down.
Could I just make one other comment? From an IT perspective, during COVID, one of the things we were asked is let's go to a cashless society because people are afraid to touch dollars. They just are. And so we kind of poised ourselves for that. We had credit cards. You'll notice we changed the way those credit card machines were facing, so the starters and monitors and membership didn't have to touch the credit cards. The person would put their own card in the machine and the transaction would happen. And so a lot of what we're requesting, and it would push us into more cash. And whether it's an armored car or a security guard, we would not want the average age of our residents carrying this much cash in nightly deposits. We did get burglarized a while back, more than a decade ago, and it was because they know how much cash we're carrying. So there will be repercussions, whether it's the same costs or some other, those are just estimates at this point, but it will change habits. It will create more vulnerability, and I think we'll hear from residents who are unhappy with the inconsistency and the confusion of what do you pay, what, where.
Mr. Schwinn, do you have a?
Thank you. Good morning. Bill Schwinn, General Manager, and I just wanted to share a couple of things that have come across my desk since we started talking about this, putting this presentation together, and some of the things that didn't get included in here. And I just want to talk on two things. When we found an old presentation on credit cards back in 2011, we kind of looked at that. I think Cliff talked about that a little bit. And it was an issue where there was no consistency really between golf accepting credit cards, membership not. And it's really a huge convenience for everyone using the credit card, as well as staff processing all this in banking. It's a trend, and it's all going in that direction. But a couple of things came up during our conversation over the last 10 years that kind of have hit home with me anyway. And one is employee safety. We had to go in and put in a lot of floor safes back in the day when we were doing a lot of checks and a lot of cash. We were hit a couple of times with burglaries and assaults. Like Cliff said, we do have an aged part-time population that does help us in the courier system that goes around to all of our facilities carrying anything from memos, shirts, hats, money, and that type of thing. We don't want to put those folks at any more risk than they really, really need to. You asked about what dollar amount would be kind of essential for us to kind of maybe think at looking at an armored car. I don't think it's a dollar amount. I think it would be an incident. We don't want to go there. And we don't want to entice people to start thinking we got a lot of cash on our hands, because we really, really don't. We don't want to go that direction. So safety, I think, is a big player in the game and a decision that ultimately you and the governing board is going to have to take into consideration. But then I did have a couple people come into our office and talk a little bit about what used to go on in membership, and that is a payment program. Back in the day when we didn't take credit cards, some people, and we've got a lot of diversity inside the walls here, but there are people that couldn't make annual payments that still want to live here. And the credit card allowed them to do that and still remain in good standing. What we were doing payment programs for lots of people. They could only afford a certain portion of that annual due at the time that it was due. So hey, can Can I come back in 90 days and pay a little bit more? Well, that automatically made them not in good standing. And it took a lot of time out of staff to kind of track down how many people we were really dealing with payment programs. The credit card program eliminated that. They can make credit card payments. All right, there's a little interest involved there, yes, but they were doing that. But that really kind of resolved the problem for us. We no longer do payment programs. And thank you to the credit cards. But, and lastly, I just want to kind of leave you with, over the last 10 or 12 years, things cost more. And we assume that into our annual dues, whether it's grass seed for golf, whether it's chlorine for swimming pools, those types of things. We typically don't want to bang people for additional service charge. If you swim every day, you shouldn't pay more than someone who doesn't. We're all in this big HOA together, and it's kind of all put on the line for everyone. We call ourselves an active community. Some people are, some people aren't, but everybody pays the same. And that's one thing that kind of keeps this thing going. So as our costs increase, whether it's a bank fee or a chlorine fee or a chemical fee or a grass seed, it's taken into consideration by all. And everybody benefits from everything that we do here and collect. And just from, I think, a lot of the things that Cliff talked about, I mean, we can certainly look at a service charge, but really that service charge is very, very small when split amongst the 27,000 people that live here. And I'll leave you with that. But we're into any questions, comments, concerns, moving forward. Be happy to talk about it moving forward. Thank you.
Christine?
Thank you, Dick. It was my understanding that you were asking the committee members to make comments. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yeah. Are you finished, David? Mr. Davis?
Thank you. I only have a couple of comments and a question. First of all, I spent a large portion of my career doing process review in industry and looking for efficiencies. And I will attest to the fact that it's not just a matter of it takes 30 seconds longer to make a transaction. It's 30 seconds longer times the number of transactions that we make and what that does to your numbers. And so I don't have a problem believing the additional costs for if we were to do dollar or cash transactions or even check transactions over credit cards. Secondly, the thought process as we looked at this is to reduce the costs. We're nearing $600,000 annually on credit card fees. As I take these as face value, the number, we haven't even cut our savings in half. If we had add to our additional operating expenses, the cost that you have outlined for us here on, I think it was number 11 or slide 11, that we're going to save about we're going to have $250,000 worth of ongoing cost, and then we're going to be saving about $350,000. And so next year we're going to be back to try to how we would adjust the savings of the $350,000. And so my point being is I don't think we're achieving the goal that we're setting out to do, and then add in all of my colleagues' comments about the inconvenience of what it does to our house, all of us that own homes and live here. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Christine?
Thank you, Dick. Really great comments, and appreciate that. The first thing, again, I want to thank you, Cliff, and the whole staff for putting together, putting a lot of thought into this. It really does help us understand all the details that we were not aware of last year when we were considering this. A comment first. It's clear to me, with all due respect to the very hardworking staff that we have here at Sun City West, we're captive by these technology systems. We have 4 different segregated POS systems and lots of other things. It's systemic underinvestment that we've made in technology, and we're just basically prisoners to that. We can't really do much right now. I would encourage the staff, the operations staff, to start thinking about adding that investment in to a master plan type of investment. We need to really rethink some of the technology that's underpinning our organization. It's not helping you, and it's not helping us. Be that as it may, that's a comment. When we're going back to some of the questions about what we do going forward, and it's sort of part of this, it's been at least 12 months that I've heard, the e-check capability is here. It's coming next month. And this is, again, not a crack on anyone on the staff. You're captive to the people doing the work. And I get that. But once we have that kind of capability and other capabilities, I would love to see us explore these alternatives on page 15. What we're looking for some quick wins, right? So how can we encourage people to use that e-check capability? How can we encourage people, our fellow members, other than just out of the goodness of our hearts? What would encourage us to use that to make those payments? Well, a difference in price would make a difference. So I don't know if we can do this in the middle of an operating year, but for example, we have, our membership dues are $540 a year. If you choose to pay by check or e-check, that would maybe take some of that price off. If we can't do it this year, then we can build that into next year's capability. So I'd love to see us start thinking about how do we incent ourselves, go out and talk to our fellow members about the opportunity to save ourselves some money. That's great, but also for many of our members, that $15, because if we're looking at about a 3%, 2.9%, it's $15. For some of us, thank the heavens and dear Lord, if we believe in that higher power, that $15 may not mean anything to us, but it's more money than some of our residents have to pay for food in a month. So I just think we need to think more broadly than ourselves. It wouldn't impact me, but it would impact others. So anyway, we need to look at these alternatives because we're looking at ways to save some money. There might be some ways to incent people, right?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yes, and to Mr. Davis's point, when they put those numbers up there, it's not like shock and awe or anything like that. It's just trying to explain the fact that operationally, there are costs which would offset savings. And when you talk about how do you get people to use other forms of payment, well, it's, change behavior with the carrot or the stick. So the stick is a fee. The carrot is a discount.
Right.
But again, you're still offsetting.
Right.
So if you're giving an incentive, you're still offsetting that savings. So yeah. And then one of the things that's in there, and there's no dollars associated with it, but those threats to our business exist. And there's an offset there too. And I don't know what that is, but I know that our bad debt used to be a lot higher. I mean, I think Pete told me there are years it was 6 figures. And the electronic payments that we have allowed us, amongst other things that we'll talk about later, Mr. Bagnano, have allowed us to keep that expense down.
And again, sort of thinking about that, thank you. Thinking about that, I like many of my colleagues and maybe some of the rest that have yet to speak, I have a lot that I could dig into or ask questions about in terms of the assumptions of costs and FTEs and so forth. But the bottom line is you did an analysis for us on these are the possible threats. You had to make some assumptions around that rather than I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm not going to hone in on those specifics. I have a lot of questions about them, but the bottom line is in order to achieve some of what we're trying to do in a relatively quick fashion, because of all of the various systems that don't talk to one another, one of the ways to do that is carrot and stick, provide some kind of incentive to our fellow members to do the right thing. And maybe it's not just doing the right thing, but it's also just helping out some members that could really use that little extra dollar. So that's the big thing is incenting the right behaviors for me and looking at, okay, we could criticize some of the assumptions, but at least we have a starting point to look at. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I'll stop now.
Thank you. Mr. Parsons?
Yeah, I'm torn on this issue, but I own 4 houses here in Sun City West, and to think that I could pay all my dues with a credit card is kind of enticing for me. If I was being very selfish, I get 2.5% back to my stocks and Fidelity every time I use my credit card. So it's enticing to use it, but I'm also here to look out for the well-being of all our members here on this committee, as being part of this committee. And I struggle with things like the people that don't use credit cards in this community, but yet now they're having to, some of their dues is going to cover for the convenience for others to use their credit card. And also the outsiders that come in and use their credit card. Now, you know, to me, it seems like some of our member dues is going to pay for the convenience of an outsider to use a credit card. So those are just some of the things that kind of bother me about this whole thing. But I do have some suggestions. You know, I understand the risk of a lot of cash, and maybe we should consider going to a cashless community here, you know, and that would take care of the concern there with lots of cash. You know, maybe you only take credit cards or debit cards or member dues for some of these things. And, you know, another suggestion might be maybe you only take checks at the main office for large ticket items at the main office. Otherwise, you use your debit or your credit card. And then you know, maybe the third suggestion here is you only charge a credit card fee for big ticket items such as member dues, or if you're going to buy a golf card or an annual pass for golf. Those are the 2 big areas that cause us to spend a lot of money on credit card fees is members and golf, right? So maybe you only look at charging the fee for credit cards for those big things, if we wanted to go towards charging a fee for credit card use. But I'm still torn on this whole thing, whether which way to go here. So those are just some thoughts, though.
Thank you. Mr. Bergnato?
Thank you, Dick. Penn and Teller have a television program that's called Fool Me, and magicians come from all over the world on the stage somewhere in Las Vegas. They perform their acts, and they try and do it in such a way that Penn and Teller can't figure out what needs to be done. And so they admit that they were fooled, and the person on the stage gets to open the show for Penn and Teller. My point here is that when they're trying to convince Penn and Teller that what they're doing is beyond Penn and Teller's capability, Penn will sit back and say, you know, you almost had me there. You almost had me. And I thank Dwayne for bringing up the fact that, God bless him, he gets 2.5% cash back on his credit card purchases, if I understood correctly. And so here's a man with 4 homes, and he has to pay, I don't know how much, it's none of my business, but he uses his credit card, and he gets back nearly the amount that we're paying the processing fee to the credit card company. It's pretty close. And there's a lot of people in this community that pay their annual dues, but they don't go bowling, they don't play golf, they don't spend a whole lot of money. Those people are paying for Dwayne to get cash back. There's no getting around that because some component is built into the dues. Now, going back to slide 2, we don't need to look at it, Terry, it's fine. It's noted that there was $620,000 in processing fees in fiscal '23. I seem to recall that when we first began this conversation months ago, there was only 520, and we were budgeting for 570 for the new year. Am I wrong?
Yeah, we had a projection. I think it was like 583.
Okay.
But we ended up at like 617 for the year.
So far more than we even thought it was. And that's for '23, which is ended now.
Yes.
So how much is in the budget for '24? Since that's an expense that has to be included.
Yeah, I don't know exactly off the top of my head. It was over 600,000, but I can get you the exact number.
Okay, so taking the 620, let's take 28,000 rec cards. People that don't use their credit cards are kicking in about $22 a person out of their dues. I've got a few other questions here. On slide 11, there's a comment about the increased exposure to the staff and to the rec center due to perhaps increased purchases and volumes of cash. I'm not sure that the exposure is really going to change that much because there are criminals who will go out there and stick a gun in your face for a heck of a lot less cash than we maintain on our premises now. Criminals are not going to know how much cash that our businesses take in, but they're not suddenly going to race over to Sun City West and say, hey, those guys are taking in more cash, we better rob them now. We're going to get robbed whether we have $5 in cash or $5,000 in cash. So I'm not sure that there's that much more of a risk. As far as there being a half, each golf course needing a 20-hour-a-week employee just to manage this, I don't believe that that's true. It's not going to take 20 hours a week. At the end of each day, the people count out the money, they put it in the safe. Manager comes in the next day, he fills out his deposit slips, the courier picks it up. I can't imagine that we're going to have somebody working 20 hours a week if we decided that we wanted to go no more, charge that credit card fee. It just doesn't seem plausible to me. As far as people going elsewhere to play golf, right now, our non-resident rate, $33 is the greens fee. That's very competitive around the valley. But when we get into the winter, Sun City West lags way behind. We're actually fairly cheap compared to what everybody else charges. In fact, ridiculously cheap. You know, my friends will come over here from Sun City Grand. They'll drop $62 to play. They're driving their own golf cart, and they're playing $62 as my guest. If I go over there as their guest, I'm spending a lot more money. Non-resident comes in here off the street, he pays a $66 greens fee. You couldn't even get in Sun City Grand, the Grand, in the wintertime because they don't have any tee times available. And if they did, it's a heck of a lot more money than the $66 we charge them. So they're going to come in here in the winter, they're going to drop $82 on a greens fee and a cart rental, and they're not going to go anywhere else because they got charged a $2.46 transaction fee. The fact that no other golf course is charging it, why must we constantly compare ourselves to other people? Are we the leaders, or are we just going to do what everybody else does? As far as the member credit goes, the e-check, the idea that I can go on the Totally website, log in, put money on my member credit account, that solves the problem of what would I do if they started charging me a credit card fee. That's exactly what I do. And so being able to put money on my account with an e-check would be a benefit that I'm sure that most of the members of the community would probably jump on. And so you almost had me.
Yeah.
But when it comes, when it comes to the software problem and the programming, that is a genuine problem. It's a problem that I see on a weekly basis when I try and enter lottery requests, and the system constantly gives me trouble, and it doesn't recognize rec card numbers any longer, only last names. So I recognize that totally, that could be the anchor that sinks this ship. So I'm done. Thank you. And by the way,
Can I give some
good job.
Can I give some context to some of that stuff?
Of course.
Okay. We collect $1.5 million annually in cash collectively. At the golf courses, it makes up 1.3 million. Okay, it's 25,000 per week in cash. To think that that wouldn't double, to me, by making this change, is reasonable. So that's cash. When it comes to the increased labor costs, it's not just the reconciling at the end of the day. It's also, I mean, golf is very busy, has windows of times, it's very busy. So if you're processing transactions and you want to get people out of there and get them on the course to get them to their tee time, you have to get those people moved through the system. Well, when you take those 30 seconds and you add them up per person paying, that time adds up to get people out of there. So that takes additional resources. So you're talking about putting somebody an additional half a FTE per week, which is a 7-day work week, not a 5-day work week. You're talking about adding a part-time person in those high volume times so you can get people processed. So 3.5 people over 7 golf courses at a business that's open 7 days a week, pretty reasonable, in my opinion. So that's how we got to that number. And as far as our public rates go, people come here from the Grand to pay $82 because they can't get on that course. So I agree with you, okay? They'll come here and play. But those people are going to come anyway, like you said, but those aren't our only public golfers. We have many people that come here outside of the 2 retirement communities. So when we compare our rates, we have to compare what those people are going to pay. And at $82, I stopped going to my gym because they stopped taking my phone number, and I had to give them a ID card every time I came in. They always took my phone number, but they decided not to do that. That was a deal breaker for me. People change their habits based on what happens, and it might not cost anything. It might be something as simple as, well, I used to be able to do that, and now I'm not able to do that. So when we talk about the threats, these are things that are out there. They're real. They're real, and people could change their habits based on them. So we have to present that so you guys can consider that. That's a little context behind some of the things, but you made some good points. Thank you.
So that's very, very good, Cliff. Thank you very much. We knew this was going to be a long discussion. I didn't know it was going to be this long. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Then we're going to come back, and I'm going to ask for questions and comments from the audience and whoever's on YouTube, and then we're going to move forward. I think we're going to move 2 of the issues that are on our agenda today to the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting, but we'll firm that up when we come back. 5 minutes, please, no more. 11:09, and we're going to reconvene. We are going to make some changes to the agenda, I think in the interest of time, we won't have time to appropriately discuss them. We're going to defer item 3.06 and item 3.07 to 3.06 will be deferred to the October 10th meeting, and 3.07 will be deferred to the October 24th meeting. 3.06 is the family pass, and the 3.07 is paper statements opting out. Okay, so in the interest of time. So now we're going to, we've had our first round of discussions. We will have more. There is time on the October 10th agenda and on the 24th to discuss this whole issue of credit cards. As you've heard Cliff's statements and in his presentations, nothing is ever as easy as it appears. So at that, I'm going to ask for questions and comments from the audience here, and then as soon as we complete that, we'll ask Christine to present the questions that we have from them. So if you would sign in, tell us your name, and whatever your comments are. Thank you.
I'm Jolene Piaskowski, 1326668. Anyway, good presentation. My question to you is this. You know, we take American Express. That usually is higher.
Okay, you need to refer your questions to me, please.
Oh, okay. We take, according to Cliff, we take American Express, Visa, but a lot of people that carry American Express, they always have a Visa or something else on them because American Express is not taken all the time. Would that be one consideration, that we would take we don't take American Express anymore? I don't have any idea how much money we take in on American Express.
I don't know if we can answer that question right now.
Okay.
That's
I have those numbers.
Oh,
well,
very
that's
good.
something that we're going to certainly look at. And since Cliff has those numbers right now, we're going to ask him to answer it.
Okay, so we don't take a ton on American Express. We take for the year. We took 158,000 on American Express. Just to give some other credit card companies, we took 792,000 on Discover, 3.9 million on MasterCard, and 15.4 million on Visa.
Visa's good. But anyway, so maybe that would be one credit card that we could just dump because everyone that has American Express usually carries
I
a
think
different one.
that's a what-if scenario, and I would probably add to that things like Apple Pay and Zelle.
Yeah, I don't know what they charge for
those.
that.
That's what we don't know.
Yeah.
So, and that's the consideration that we'd have for that.
And then I also would like to comment on Christine, how she wants a little carrot in front of all of us. Okay, so the simple fact is that our members are very used to paying their membership fee with credit card because it's 51% of the pie, correct? Is that how I read that? Okay, so we can train our residents. All we need to do is put a little carrot in front of them. So whether you say you pay by check and we give you a $20 credit, and the credit could be applied to next year, or the credit could be applied to your membership, you know what I'm saying? We can train them, we just have to do it. Just my opinion.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Hi, Nick Turner, 131829. I'm on the Chartered Clubs Committee. I'd just like to say I'm speaking for myself here. I just picture the first time a public golfer comes in for his first round of golf after we've instituted the additional fee for use of a credit card, and he doesn't have cash with him and he doesn't have a checkbook with him, or her. What's he going to think? I think about younger people who are moving into the community who are actually don't use checks anymore, carry very little cash, pay with their watch, pay with their phone. What are they going to think about the community? What does that say about us, that we're starting to nickel and dime people who just used to behaving in an entirely different way? But also, I'd like the committee and the governing board to think about that you're actually replacing credit cards with people, and those people we're struggling to recruit. you're replacing credit card fees with complexity and customizations in a software system which is complex and heavily customized already. And that increases the long-term expense to maintain and how you change that computer system in the future. There's an opportunity cost here in management time. Do you want several managers of several parts of these recreation centres over a period of several months to be devoting a lot of their time and energy to solving a credit card fees problem? And I put problems in air quotes. There's an opportunity cost there to what your managers are going to be doing. When it comes to those of us who are not paying by credit card, subsidizing the behaviors of those who are paying by credit card, I don't use the pools, or I subsidize the heating of those pools. I subsidize the air conditioning of the indoor pools. But, you know, that's just something we do here. So I would suggest and recommend do what we can with e-checks when it comes to things like membership fees and dues. That's something which technologically seems to be doable at reasonable cost and will save us some credit card fees. But as for doing anything else, I don't think we should be bothering doing that. It's just too complicated, too expensive, too much management time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Christine, do we have questions from YouTube?
We do indeed. Oh, here we go. We do indeed. Sue Ambler, 129848. Do we know what practices other similar associations have regarding credit card fees, etc.?
I think that's probably more of a question that we're going to, I don't know that we know that. Do you have any idea, Cliff, if we have any experience with other?
We looked into this last spring, and nobody's currently charging processing. We know specifically in golf. We checked recently, but as far as membership goes, I believe Sun City is charging a fee on their special events, which really isn't a credit card processing fee. It's just like a ticketing fee.
Good question. Christine?
Mystical Michelle, 127597. What's the explanation on the timing dilemma for the e-check processing module?
Cliff?
We had to go through our upgrade first. We knew we had the capability when we talked about it last year. We didn't know at that time that it was only available in the upgrade. And we recently had that upgrade. So as Katie stated earlier, we do now have that capacity, and it'll just take time to turn it on, train on it, and then implement it. So we should, certainly by hopefully in the next few months, we should have that ability.
Thank you. Same member, Michelle, 127597. I'm speaking on that member's behalf. I would not be in favor of charging back the fee for membership, dinging the residents yet again. I'm already paying for non-residents to be able to use their credit cards to play golf and bowl. Comment. Gary Bach, 135435. It seems that the savings of $600,000 will override any other costs, and even if only half is saved, that it would still outweigh any other costs.
So we'll take that under consideration. Thank you.
Michelle, Mystical Michelle, 127597. The next generation is using apps like PayPal or Venmo or Zelle. Have we considered these in the mix?
Cliff, would you answer that?
Those would be enhancements, some of the enhancements that I talked about earlier that would get probably hindered if we went to a processing fee.
But we would take that into consideration.
Oh, absolutely. And those are enhancements.
Yeah,
that-
we want
Yeah.
to be able that we have thoroughly researched that, because that is a huge issue. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's all the questions? Okay, so we will put that, we'll close the discussion on that for now. So we're going to go ahead and proceed to the next item. And the next item is item 3.04. I would like to open, before I introduce Cliff on this, to make comments, I'm going to read a paragraph that I have prepared, and I've already sent it to the four people that are going to be on our working group. We're establishing a working group here. The purpose is to formally establish a working group for the Budget and Finance Committee, where the working group will assist in information, gathering information for policy discussions, specifically for the question of the creation and the use of an economic index for budget formulation purposes. The formal work group appointments will be done at this meeting, September the 19th. The members of the work group are Christine Novello. She's going to be the chairman and the advisor. Mr. Gary Bosak from the Budget and Finance Committee. Ray Davis from the Budget and Finance Committee. And Cliff Swan. I gave them 5 charges to identify and collect data relevant to the index utilization, to analyze relevant data, to search for rationale to accept or reject the use of an index, identify alternative options and variations, and formulate discussion points and recommendations to be presented to the Budget and Finance Committee for consideration. Their work product will be due October the 24th, but if they have completed ahead of schedule, which I anticipate they may present at the October the 10th Budget and Finance Committee. So, Cliff, if you would add to that specifically some of the information about the use of an index.
Yes, sir. So, just want to give some information as to how we budget, and then talk about dues a little bit, because I think that's what this is pertaining to. So how do we come up with maybe a more scientific way of and less political way of determining what our dues increases are going to be every year? So ultimately, we look at the fully funded balance percentage, the FFB percent. We look at it for the current projected year, the budgeted year, put a budget together to see what that is going to be, and then a 5-year outlook on that. And that kind of drives, that's really the key indicator that we have now. If you want to call that an index, that's what we look at. And so when we start building the budget, we build assumptions in the budget. Okay, we explain those assumptions every year. But before we get to the final assumptions, we do our own internal assumptions. And on the expense structure, biggest is payroll expenses. So we look at what's happening with minimum wage, because 65% of our employees are part-time. So their wages are tied directly to minimum wage. So they may be what minimum wage is, or they may be minimum wage plus a certain amount, but minimum wage drives their wages, and their immediate supervisors, and even the layer above that is impacted by minimum wage as well, because you have that, they're all tied together. So the salaries will grow as you go up the ladder when it comes to minimum wage. So labor is a big part of that. We use minimum wage, or an estimate of what we think minimum wage is, what's going to happen with minimum wage to drive that. And then we have our merit increases, which essentially are 3% per year, which is kind of average for merit increases. So those are the things that drive the main factors in 65% of our budget, which is payroll. and wages and benefits. The other items we assign a inflationary factor to, and that's based on what's going on in the economy in specific line items. But overall, we start with an overall inflationary factor. And then we look at those specific line items, take into account any operation changes, good or bad. So an increase or decrease based on an operational change or what's going on specifically with that item. So fuel, a lot of times, has its own kind of key indicator. Like I said, wages has its own key indicator. Seed is a big expense for us at $700,000+ per year. We look and see what's going on with grass seed. So we have all these little indicators in the budget process. And those start literally at the grassroots level from the department heads and department managers. Roll that up and then we say, okay, here's what our expense structure is going to look like next year. We're service driven. We're not profit driven. So we start with our expense structure by looking at it and say, how do we continue to provide the services that we're providing? What's the impact of that in our operating budget? We're not top line driven. We're not trying to return a profit. We do return in the form of a 40% FFB percent, but we're not looking to drive profit. So that's how we build our budget. And then we take a look at our fees and say, okay, what's the impact of the economy on those? Bowling and golf, two big ones. Events, okay. APFs below the line, but also impacted by the economy. And then we say, okay, what's going to happen in these areas? And then finally we look at dues, because we know dues, we're going to collect our dues every year. We know that houses are going to have people in them, and those people are going to pay member dues. Guaranteed, our only guaranteed source of income. And so we look at that and then we say, okay, how do we put all this together? Return, last year it was $1 million, to put into the reserve fund from operations. And that's kind of how we build the operating budget. Now, I just want to give a little bit of context here on dues. Okay, so I took a window of 15 years. So I looked back 15 years to see what dues have done, and then kind of projected 15 years forward based on what we did the last 15 years. So we look from 2008 to 2023. Our dues in 2008 were $325. 2023, they're $540. That's an average of a 3% increase per year to get to that. Excuse me, that was an average of a 3.5% increase per year to get to that amount. So that's what we averaged over the last 15 years. There are times when it's been 5%, there are times when it's been 0%. But that's how it's averaged. So if we took that and applied some logic or theories to the next 15 years, what would we be? So if we took a 3% increase per year from 540, we know costs are going to go up. I mean, it's inevitable. We know that for the last 15 years, there's years we'd had 0 dues increases, there's years where we had 6% increases, and 2.3 and 3.7. But we know at 3% increase, our dues in fiscal year 2039 would be $841. Okay? If we said flat, no, you know what? Let's go up $20 per year, regardless. We said $20 is our number. Okay? We know that our dues would be $840, which would be a 2.4% average increase. Or if we said we averaged 3.5% for the next 15 years, our dues would be $905 in 2039. So I think when people move in the community, I think we can do maybe a better job of talking about that. And I don't know how we do that exactly, but I think we need to communicate that costs go up, everything here is subsidized, and we know that costs are going to increase as time goes along. Now, are there factors within those years that may cause us to have very small dues increases? Are there windfalls, big years in golf, big years in APS? Absolutely. But averaged over time, we know that the dues are going to go up. And we know that because that's what they've done. And we're in a good spot right now. We really are. The fact that we've got a 49 or 50% FFB percent, and that not only covers our repair and replacement, but there's also built-in capital in there for new capital. We're in a pretty good spot. And I think we've done a pretty good job over the last 15 years with the current process that's in place. The question is, I think you've been tasked with, is there a way to make it more defined? And I think that's a tough question to answer. So anyway, that's all I have on.
Thank you. I think it's too premature to ask for any questions or comments on this. The working group hasn't really done anything yet, and then when they come back with their report, we'll open it up to discussion at that point. So at that, I'll repeat that we're taking item 3.06, family pass discussion. Yes.
Thank you, Dick. I'm sorry to slow you down. Item number 3.05, the appointment of a working committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And thank you very much for the opportunity to take all of the information that Cliff and his team have put together. The working group is an open situation. So for those of you who are listening, who are still here, hanging with us, please take a look at board docs for our schedule of discussions. We are going to do nothing behind closed doors. So just know that we'll be having some discussions together with Cliff. Cliff and I are in an advisory type of capacity in that working group, but still, just know, look for those to be posted on board docs. And once now that we have just now been appointed, Ray and Gary, myself, and Cliff will come up with a schedule of times to get together and start working through this information. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I did miss that. I guess this is the formal appointment of the working group. They have received written instruction from me appointing them and giving them their deliverables and their scope and all that. And actually, I read that to you earlier. So looking forward to that. The item 3.06, as I said earlier, is going to be deferred to October 10th. And that is on the issue of family pass discussion. Item 3.07, paper statements opt-out feature. And this is an issue that Mr. Bagnato brought up at last meeting. That will be deferred until the October, it's the October 24th meeting. So that's what I said. I wrote down something different. October 24th. Okay. So at that, I'm going to ask for comments from the committee. I'm going to start with Mr. Bosak.
I have none, Dick. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Callis?
None, thank you.
David Miller?
None.
Mr. Davis?
No additional comments.
Christine?
No additional comments.
No
Dwayne?
further comments. None, thank you.
At that, it's 11:33. Our next meeting will be October the 10th at 9 a.m. in this room in the lecture hall. We have any guest comments? None whatsoever. Okay.
Nothing new.
So our next meeting, as I said, is October the 10th. The agenda will be printed in advance, and at 11:34, this meeting is adjourned.